with Paul. 1st and 2nd Timothy are disputed letters. Well, many times during that time period in history, you had a scribe, and you would dictate to the scribe, and the scribe might take what? Literary license to put things in his own words, and you structure sentences differently than Paul would. And so you would have, so there's all sorts of reasons why you might have a disputed letter. It doesn't mean that they don't belong in the Bible. It doesn't mean that they're not inspired by God. This is clearly, universally undisputed, the letter of Philemon. Almost to the person, biblical scholars say Paul wrote it. So it's an undisputed letter. It's the shortest of Paul's writings that I mentioned before. It is included between the 4th century and the 8th century. Scholars took the letters that were circulating around Christian churches and they copied them. And they talk about the uncial, I think it's uncial is the way you say it, manuscripts. And I think what that means is they're all written in capital letters. They're all capital letters, these manuscripts. Well, the book of Philemon is recorded in its entirety in 12 of those manuscripts, which is really sort of phenomenal that it's in that many different manuscripts in its entirety. And the Greek text are almost word for word when it's recorded in these manuscripts. The ones that are written in Greek, almost word for word. And that's phenomenal as well. So it's extremely well-preserved book. We're getting the real thing when we read Philemon. Mm-hmm. I said it differs from Paul's other writings in 2 ways. One is it's written to an individual, and it's what? It addresses an individual issue. This issue with Philemon, the slave owner, and his slave that has run away, Onesimus. What's the other way it differs? Just anybody could answer. It's a letter of mediation. There's no other letter like that in the Bible. It's a letter of mediation between these 2 parties. He's trying to bring these 2 parties back together in a Christian way. So it differs in that sense. Now, when was it written and where was it written? Well, we're not quite sure. But we obviously there's a lot of speculation around that, and let me sort of walk through some of that. Paul's incarcerated. It's clear by what he says in the letter, and really there are 2 long periods of incarceration that are recorded in the Bible. One is in Caesarea, when Paul was arrested in Jerusalem, and he was taken before the legal authorities. His life was threatened. There was a plot to kill him by the Jews. And so what happened? Well, during the middle of the night, they spirited him off to Caesarea. And if you remember he appealed his Roman citizenship. When they brought him on trial, he said, wait a minute here, I'm a Roman citizen. I want to be heard by Caesar. My case needs to go. And that was his right as a Roman citizen. But like I said, there was this plot to kill him, and the plot became known. And they took him to Caesarea, and he spent 2 years in jail in Caesarea. And then they took him to Rome, and he had another long period of incarceration in Rome. Actually, we believe that he had 2 periods. He was incarcerated a number of other times. I think it's the 11th chapter of 2 Corinthians talks about how many times he was beaten and how he was arrested. One of the secular writers said that he was in chains 7 times, that he was incarcerated 7 different times. It's widely held that one of those was in Ephesus. Lots of people, biblical scholars, believe that one of those periods of incarceration was, a lengthy incarceration, was in Ephesus. So it's got to be one of those 3 places that he wrote the letter from. Now, let's do some geography. If you've been in my Acts class, you know that I like geography. This is modern day Turkey, what we would call Asia Minor in Paul's time. And I know between my poor handwriting and the poor, what do you call these things? Markers. You probably can't understand any of this. But this is the Aegean Sea, and this would be Greece over here, and then there would be the Adriatic Sea in Italy. So Rome would be quite far from what? Colossae. We'll see that he's writing 2 letters at the same time, one to the Colossians and with this personal letter going to Onesimus. Now, the Romans had built roads across the Roman Empire. And this dotted line are the major roads through Asia Minor. And it's quite easy to understand why Paul went where he did when you plot the cities that they talk about in the missionary journeys, Paul's missionary journeys, and the Roman roads. He was following the road, the yellow brick road. They obviously, the Romans built these roads to what? To facilitate trade. Now, 2 seaports, Smyrna, that's this point here, and Ephesus were the 2 seaports that had what? Sort of the trailhead of these roads. And they were connected by a road. But as you go east from there, you have Laodicea and Colossae that were very close together. This is Hierapolis. And that area right there was the Lycus Valley. The Lycus Valley. Lycus River ran through there. There were mountain ranges both above and below that area. And so it was natural that they built a road through the valley. And the Lycus River ran through that valley. And, you know, these towns were on that river and on the road. And those 3, Laodicea, Hierapolis is this one, and Colossae, were very close together. But as you can tell from the other cities along that road, it's very easy to understand why Paul did his missionary journey. He did Derbe, he did Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch on his first missionary journey. They were on the road. And you can imagine what? Towns off the road would have been like towns off the road here in the U.S. They would have been small. These would have been the vibrant, cities where you had more wealth and more trade and stuff like that. And then when you go over here, well, certainly Ephesus and Colossae, Smyrna, Sardis, Philadelphia, those all remind us of Revelation, the 7 churches of Revelation. Now, why do I talk about geography here? The question is where was it written and when was it written? Well, 2 possibilities, really. Ephesus, if Paul was incarcerated there for a lengthy period of time. And there is a suggestion in the book that he might have been in Ephesus when he wrote it. For example, look in verse 22. One more thing, get right to the end. It says, one more thing, prepare a guest room for me, for I am hoping through your prayers to be restored to you. It suggests that he's fairly near. it would have been a very long journey from Rome to Colossae. It would have been a very long journey.
And the room would have been dusty.
Very. And so it sort of suggests that he's pretty close by when he says, hey. And also, if Onesimus had run away, Ephesus would have been what? A very convenient place for a slave without any means to go to seek refuge. So some people speculate that it was written in Ephesus. Now, however, against that argument, let's go to Colossians, the book of Colossians, the 4th chapter. Seventh verse. Tychicus will tell you all the news about me. He is a beloved brother, a faithful minister, and a fellow servant in the Lord. I have sent him to you for this very purpose, so that you may know how we are, and that he may encourage your hearts. He is coming with Onesimus, the faithful and beloved brother, who is one of you. Now, some people say, well, that Onesimus was a different one from the one in Philemon. Highly unlikely. He says what? He's one of you. And remember that what? Philemon had the house church in Colossae. And some people believe he was the overseer of the house churches in the Lycus Valley, of the house churches in all of these 3 cities. But certainly, he's saying what? This Onesimus is one of you. And so some people, Colossians was written from Rome. We're fairly certain of that. And so it suggests that what? It's probably a stronger argument that the book of Philemon was written from Rome and Paul's incarceration there. And if it's written from there, it would have been in 61 AD, roughly, about in the early 60s. If it was written from Ephesus, it would have had to be much earlier than that, probably in 55 or so, mid-50s, where if it's written from Rome, it was early 60s. So, that tells us about sort of the date and the place it was written from. Any questions or comments about any of that?
I got a question.
Yeah.
Do you think Paul's age is a factor? 'Cause I think he mentions he was an old man.
Yeah.
Does that have a factor on when you think it might have been written?
Been written at a later date. That would suggest a later date, earlier date.
So would it have been closer to the Roman incarceration?
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Another thing just as a side note, back up a little bit in Colossians, the 4th chapter. I don't think it's accidental that he talks about sending Onesimus back in the 4th chapter and ninth verse. Go back to the 21st verse. No, 22nd.
Chapter 3.
Yeah, chapter 3. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, not only while being watched and in order to please them, but wholeheartedly fearing the Lord. Whatever your task, put yourselves into it and do it as done for the Lord and not for your masters, since you know that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance of your reward. These are called the subordination or subordination codes. Notice he starts with wives, then he talks about children, then he talks about fathers, then he talks about slaves. And he's talking about what? Subordinate yourself to who you're supposed to subordinate yourself to. Children to parents, wives to husbands, fathers. Talks about, in this case, he really doesn't talk about subordinating in this particular passage. He does, and talks about being subject, wives and husbands, to each other in another passage. And then slaves to masters. Call them the subordination codes. And, right following that, he talks about sending Onesimus back. And I don't think that's accidental. I think that was in his mind as he was writing that. Okay. If there's no other comments or questions about that, what is the book of Philemon or the letter of Philemon about?
Jack, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
You said we know that Colossians is written in Rome. How do we know that?
Well, one, given the people that were surrounding Paul, I believe that entourage and the people that he mentions there were people that he had that gathered around him in Rome. Clearly, if he wrote Philemon from Ephesus, he would have written Colossians from Red, because he wrote them at the same time. That's fairly widely accepted that's written from Rome. Any other comments, questions? Okay, what's the central focus of the book of the letter of Philemon? What is the central focus?
He's trying to get the master to take his slave back.
Okay. So would we say it was about slavery?
No, we would say it's about forgiveness and reconciliation.
Okay. For centuries in modern history, this book letter has been used by many people as a justification for slavery. It's because what? Slavery was such a prominent issue in our modern history. And when I say modern history, I mean within the last 200 years. That's modern history. And many people use the book to support their personal stance. And this is a classic case study of people taking their social position, their current circumstances, and using that as a rationale to read into the Bible things that weren't intended. It's a classic example of that. And it really, for a long time, obscured for many people the true meaning and the sort of timeless significance of the book. Because the main focus, if you look at it carefully, is what? It's not about slavery. Slavery is a backdrop, and it's important. But it is what? It's not the main focus of the book. The main focus of the book is what? Well, Pat said forgiveness and reconciliation. Let's expand on that a little bit. What is the forgiveness and reconciliation? Why?
Because of Christ.
Because of Christ. It's about what? It's about the power of the gospel.
And what it does to people in their
To
relationships.
shape relationships of individuals.
And to break down barriers.
And to make barriers disappear, what? Man-made barriers that we have created to make those disappear.
And in this
And
case,
allow
the
for-
slavery and master, to break down that relationship.
Yes, yeah. Martha?
Is Paul asking for him to be freed from slavery? Because
Well-
that's how I see it, right? Like it's saying, all right, he was a slave, but now he's more than a slave. He's a brother. He's one of you now. He's my son. Like you don't call a slave my son and my brother. And he also says like any debts or faults that you've had with him,
Yeah.
I'll take them on myself. That's what an equal does. And it sounds to me that he's pleading for that debt
Well,
to be shifted to him and
Yeah.
freedom for.
yeah, it's complicated. That's the way I'll respond right now. We're gonna talk about this for the next 20 minutes. It's complicated. Let's talk about slavery a little bit. In the Roman Empire, what was slavery about? It was very widespread. It was ubiquitous, and depending on where you were in the Roman Empire, slavery. The amount of slavery differed. They said in Italy, in the Rome and where the center of the empire was, there were as many as 30% of the population was slaves. 30% of the population. In Egypt, which was part of the Roman Empire, had been captured by Rome, 7% of the population was slavery. So there were some significant differences in terms of the amount of slavery that occurred depending where you were. But what? The Roman system supported slavery. It supported slavery, but it was not like what we think about when we say slavery. Slavery in this country was what? It was race-based. Was race-based. And slavery in the Roman Empire was not race-based. They captured, nations all over the Western world, and they would take slaves. Most of the slaves were people who were captured through war and piracy. That's what slavery in this country would have been about piracy, really. We had slave traders went to Africa, captured people, brought them back. It wasn't about a war. It was about piracy is what it was about. And so there was some of that went on in the Roman Empire, but it was not race-based. And slaves could be what? Farmers, work in the fields, work in the mines, but they could be doctors, lawyers, teachers. A lot of the professional jobs were done by slaves. And what? Household managers. Does that bring to mind somebody? Joseph. Joseph what? Worked his way up to be running Potiphar's entire house. And then he got in trouble with Potiphar's wife and went to prison, and he ended up what? Running the whole prison. And then what? He got out of prison, then he was running all of Egypt. He was a slave the whole time. He was a slave. So sort of the role of the slave was quite different. Now, a slave was still property and didn't have rights. You were a slave. But there was a significant chance of what is called manumission. Manumission is what? Being set free. Being set free. You could be set free, and even a Roman citizen could be a slave. Some people sold themselves into slavery when they owed debts to get out of debt. So they would sell themselves into slavery. They would sell a child into slavery because of economic reasons. There was all sorts of ways that you could, even a Roman citizen could become a slave. So this, it was quite different from what we know as slavery. There was manumission. The difference, we talk about emancipation. Emancipation is about a government letting people free. Manumission is about what? A slave owner letting a slave free. And there was formal way to let slaves free. You could issue a decree, a legal document giving the slavery freedom. And if you did that, the slave became a Roman citizen. And there was only one restriction: you couldn't hold public office. But you had all the rights of a Roman citizen if you were set free. If you were informally freed, if there wasn't an official document setting you free, then you didn't have citizenship. You didn't have the rights of a Roman citizen. And if you died, all your property would go back to your owner. Now, what about in the Hebrew Christian milieu? What was slavery about there? Well, let's look at some verses. Let's look at a few verses. Exodus 20. It really started, what's in Exodus 20?
Ten Commandments.
10 Commandments. What does that have to do with slavery?
I mean, verse
You have to
17 talks
labor on
about it.
Sabbath.
The 8th verse, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But on the 7th day is a Sabbath. To the Lord your God you shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your town. Now, at this time in history, there was no such thing as a weekend. They didn't have a weekend. And typically, if you didn't have any money, what was your life about?
Survival. Survival.
Survival. I work today to what?
Eat today.
To eat today.
Mhm.
I eat today and what? I start again tomorrow. I work that day. Now, what was Sabbath about?
Rest.
Trusting that God will provide for you even if you didn't work for it.
It's about trusting God is what it was about. It's about you could take a day off and not work because what? God provides. You don't provide. And so, it was really had to do with a very spiritual sort of notion. And he said what? Slaves don't have to work. And that really was what? Revolutionary. That a slave didn't have to work along with everybody else. It really changed the mindset. And this was what? This was how many years before Christ?
A lot.
Couple of thousand?
Several.
Couple of thousand. So really the Hebrew tradition was much different. And notice in the 21st chapter, he immediately after he gives the 10 Commandments starts giving these are the ordinances that you shall set before them, and he starts talking about slavery. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, but in the 7th he shall go out a free person. So it was automatic. After the 6 years service, you were set free, without debt. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, their wife and the children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if a slave declares, I love my master, my wife, my children, I will not go out a free person, then his master shall bring him before God. He shall be brought to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him for life. So there was a sanction for slavery under the Hebrew laws. Slavery was sanctioned, but it was quite different from Roman slavery. There was protection for the slave. Now go to Deuteronomy 15. Beginning with the 12th verse. If a member of your community, whether a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and works for you for six years, in the 7th year you shall set that person free. And when you send a male slave out from you, a free person, you shall not send him out empty-handed. Provide liberally out of your flock, your threshing floor, your winepress, thus giving to him some of the bounty with which the Lord your God has blessed you. So quite different from what we think about as slavery, although it was sanctioned. And then in Leviticus 25, we won't read it, we're running out of time. It talks about you shouldn't treat your slaves harshly. And it repeats it several times during Leviticus 25. So, the Hebrew sort of version of slavery was much, much different. Now, it's interesting that it was sanctioned. Why? Because the Hebrews had been slaves for 400 years in Egypt and for 70 years in Babylonia. These laws were written after they'd been slaves for 400 years. So it was quite interesting that it was sanctioned, but it's not quite the sort of notion we have when we talk about slavery. Now, that's a backdrop. What about the Christian approach to slavery?
Wasn't this slavery also could be used as a way of protection too? If somebody has nothing or they can't, like selling yourself can also be a way that says like, I will be provided for and can manage.
It may be equivalent to joining the army today. If you're coming from poverty,
Yeah.
you find those of us that have served in the military understand that a lot of young men that have no future, they join the military and you got a future. And you got, 3 meals a day, you got a warm place to sleep, and so forth and so on.
3 months at a time.
Well, certainly Colossians 4, that we've already read, tells us something about slavery. And the Christian approach to this institution of slavery. It says what? We read it just a minute ago.
Treat them fairly.
Do your job. Do your job. Do it right. But if you take the New Testament in its entirety, what do you think the Christian approach to slavery is? What is the Christian approach? And Paul would have been well aware of the Hebrews sanction and all the rules and regulations of the Hebrews, but he'd also be well aware as a Roman citizen of the Roman legal system that supported the institution of slavery. What about the Christian view?
There shall be no.
No difference, I mean,
No.
no distinction.
Galatians 3.
Mhm.
What's it say?
They're all one in Christ Jesus. Slave or free.
There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, male nor female, for if you are all one in Christ Jesus.
Okay, which suggests what? That
There's
there
no-
is no
there's
slavery in Christianity. That Christianity is opposed to that.
I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but that doesn't seem to be what that verse actually was saying.
That what?
I mean, that in Galatians, right there that we just read,
Yeah.
there's neither Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female. It's not saying those don't exist, right? Like, it's not like, oh, there's also not male and female, or there's also not Jews and Greek. It's like, the point is there's equality and oneness. And it seems like Paul also in other places says, if you can get free and become free, that's great. But like, the focus isn't your freedom or not. It's how do I serve Christ and how do we function as one, whether I'm a slave or I'm a master.
Okay.
So I wouldn't,
Okay. Well, that's why I said, Martha, it's complex. You know, if you look at Christianity as a whole, certainly today we would say what? We oppose slavery. We oppose slavery. Why didn't Paul become a profound, outspoken, dyed-in-the-wool abolitionist? Why didn't he oppose? I'm going to ask Martha since you brought this up. You know, love one another as Jesus loved us. Would Jesus sanction slavery? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think Christianity is opposed to slavery
So I think
of any form, whether it's the soft form of the Hebrews or whether it is the hard form of the Romans. I think what? Or the much harder form of what? American slavery. I think Christianity is opposed to that. Why didn't Paul?
because that's not what he was called to do. So there could have been an argument. We could have all gotten off path and we're all talking about slavery, right? But Paul was here to bring souls to Christ,
Yes.
right? And that's number one. And if he goes off script, that's going to be a whole lifelong work. I mean, we've seen it throughout history, lifelong work, trying to get this right. And he needed to focus on what he was put here to do. And that was bring souls to Christ.
Okay.
Yeah, that.
It would have been what? Foolhardy for him personally and his work as what? Sort of the modern day forerunner. He wouldn't have been a forerunner, he would have been a post runner of Jesus Christ. He was the leader of the Christian movement. And it would have been foolhardy for him to say, my life work is to oppose slavery. It would have also been harmful to the Christian movement, which was a new, nascent movement, and it would have been very harmful because you got 30% of the people in Italy are slaves. And, you know, the power structure of the world is saying what? It's okay. And for you to take that on, it would have been what? A terrible waste of his time and I say waste of his time, it wouldn't have been a waste for him to oppose. But let me give you a modern day example. I am extremely opposed to legalized drugs, legalized marijuana. Many of you know that my sister was a dope addict, and she spent most of her life incarcerated, or I say incarcerated, not in a prison, but in a lockdown institution, because she fried her brain with drugs. And she started with marijuana. There was an article in our paper recently about people addicted to marijuana. It said you can get addicted to marijuana. And she got addicted to it and kept progressing, and she took every drug you could name. And it fried her brain, and she spent her lifetime, or most of her adult lifetime, locked up in a nursing home type situation. She was mentally and physically handicapped. So I'm extremely opposed to marijuana. Am I going to change the use of marijuana in the United States? No. I can be opposed to it. I can be outspoken about it. I can what? Vote against it. I can contribute to organizations that oppose it. I can do a lot of things to express my dissatisfaction, my opposition. But I'm not going to change it, and that's what? I'm not going to make that my life's calling. Because if it's my life's calling, then what? Then I can't do what I'm supposed to do. Which is what?
You should bring people, show people Jesus.
Yeah, show people Jesus. Be an ambassador for Christ. Rob?
And it really is, you're talking about getting kind of off, and she was talking about getting off of, your path and everything. The whole thing here, it's a wonderful example of, he is talking to Philemon about identity.
Mm.
How do you identify yourself?
Yeah.
And he's telling him how he identifies himself, but also how he identifies Onesimus because of his conversion. And just like he did in Galatians 3, we are not identified. Our worth is not, tied up in any
Social role.
ethnic or social order at all. Whole thing, all the ground is always level at the foot of the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what, and interestingly, he encourages him, he said, you make the decision.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
said, I could. I think he does have a little bit of a
Halfway stick, a stick
maybe,
behind his
but,
back. Yeah.
but also it's us, we are Philemon as well, what are we gonna choose to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
God, it's frightening to me.
Mm.
Personal choice, free will. It's a wonderful, terrible thing.
Okay, on that note, we gotta quit because my wife is trapped back there with all those kids.
She's the one who just rang the bell the third time, so.
Third bell.
That's really for me, probably.
Next week, we will start walking through the verses of Philemon.
Thanks, Jack.
You may not have. We need to give him another semester.
Another
Yeah.
pen.